Good morning, everybody. So today we're reading the last part of The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and two things to focus on here. One is his idea about finding your relationship with God, and the other is his ideas regarding choice. So, talking about God, he speaks about suffering, and he says some people found God through surrender, through total acceptance of what is, into which they were forced by their intense suffering. So that should sound familiar to a lot of what we read about in the big book regarding being brought into this spiritual lifestyle by the intense suffering we experience in our addiction. And he says they must have realized on some level that their pain was self-created, as we all did as recovering addicts. He goes on to say later, I don't call it finding God, because how can you find that which was never lost, the very life that you are? The word God is limiting, not only because of thousands of years of misperception and misuse, but also because it implies an entity other than you. God is being itself, not a being. Now, this will run counter to what some people believe, and that's okay. There's room for different beliefs. But I read this to present a different idea about God, and to present the idea that God is inextricably linked to being, and being in the moment, and presence, and what is happening right now. Not what's happening in the past, not what's happening in the future, but right now. And that's been an important idea to me in my recovery and in my own journey to try to surrender to what's happening in the moment rather than being caught up in the future and the past. So then he goes on to talk a little bit about choice and what kind of choices we make in life. Now, if you addicts especially are familiar with this, you get into patterns where you wish that you could do something different than what your mind is compelling you to do. And I will never forget this one day that I was sitting out on my porch and I was drunk at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a work day, and I was so upset with myself, and I actually threw an empty beer bottle into my yard just out of anger. And I said, that's it. I'm done drinking for the day. But it didn't take me more than 30 minutes to find myself walk into the fridge to get another one. And even as I was doing it, everything in my mind said, you shouldn't do this. This is crazy. This is insane. But I did it anyway. And you know what? That was years before I actually quit drinking. That was years. So that insanity went on for years. And so it seems like we have this free will, this capability for free will, and yet when we get into these patterns, our ability to make choices sometimes seems very limited. So what he says about that is, choice begins the moment you disidentify from the mind and its conditioned patterns, the moment you become present. Until you reach that point, you are unconscious, spiritually speaking. This means that you are compelled to feel, think, and act in certain ways according to the conditioning of your mind. That is why Jesus said, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Now, I had never thought about that particular phrase in that way. They know not what they do, as in they're not conscious of what they do. They don't have a choice because they are acting based on the conditioning of their mind. I had never thought of it that way. So that was an interesting idea. He goes on to talk about the example of, your friend is stuck in a relationship with an abusive partner, and not for the first time. Why? Because they have no choice. The mind, conditioned as it is by the past, always seeks to recreate what it knows and is familiar with. Even if it is painful, at least it is familiar. The mind always adheres to the known. Now, we've heard about this before. If you went to IOP, if you went to PHP, and it was discussed in SARC in SARC as well. This idea is something that we should be familiar with, that the mind, even the pain of addiction, even the pain of drug use, even the pain of withdrawal, the mind will take us back there because that's familiar. And even though it's pain, the mind knows that pain. And so it goes back to what it's familiar with, and that's why we end up in the same place again. But he goes on to say, nobody chooses dysfunction, conflict, and pain. Nobody chooses insanity. They happen because there is not enough presence in you to dissolve the past, not enough light to dispel the darkness. You are not fully here. You have not quite woken up yet. In the meantime, the conditioned mind is running your life. So two big things I took from that phrase, from that passage. They happen because there is not enough presence in you to dissolve the past. So what do we do in several of the steps? I mean, steps 4 through 9 in a lot of ways are all about dissolving the past of our lives and going through, dealing with it, and then dissolving it so that we don't have to just sit with it anymore, so that we can be in the present moment. So I like that part. And then the next thing he says is, in the meantime, the conditioned mind is running your life. And I really identify with that. I do think that for me personally, a lot of my addiction, I felt like I was on autopilot. I was just doing what my mind told me I needed to do, and that was really driven by my addiction and what I needed to get what I wanted in terms of my addiction and all of that. And in recovery, I feel like there is much more choice involved in the things I do on a daily basis and the decisions I make. And it's very freeing, even though it seems like I have more responsibility in terms of the choices I make. It's very freeing to actually have those choices and to be able to wake up and know that, I can choose to live my life a certain way rather than being on autopilot because I'm simply reacting and almost a slave to a conditioned mind that just takes me through the same motions every day of my life. So that's what I got out of the reading for today. That was the last part of The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I enjoyed the book. There were parts of it that were a little too new agey for me. I probably shouldn't use that term that way, but that's the best way I can think of it. I did find that there were places where he made bold statements that it would have been nice if he had been able to back them up by some kind of research, because I'm pretty sure there was some research out there that he could have used to back them up. So for the next book, I wanted to look at something a little bit more research focused, a little bit more factual, and less on the spiritual side and more on the scientific side. So for that, we're going to be looking at Staying Sober by Terence Gorski and Merlene Miller. And this is a book that is written based on years of research, of collective research, regarding the treatment of alcoholics who relapse on a regular basis, and some of the work that Gorski himself pioneered in terms of what kinds of therapies are helpful for getting these people to maintain long-term sobriety, but also what are the warning signs that he found through thousands, his study of thousands of individuals. What are the warning signs he found regarding relapse? So tomorrow we'll start here. Really looking forward to this. Grab a copy if you can. I know that it is a book that many people use especially for new people in recovery who are trying to get a handle on what kind of things do I need to be on the lookout for to see that relapse coming before the drink's in my hand. So, hope you all have a great day. I'll see you back here tomorrow.